When you're ready. All of them. We're going to look at the business problem here in a minute. I want to finish up shadow AI because that's a real problem out there. It was bad enough with generative AI. Now, of course, gotten worse. Creating these machine learning apps is more complex than just using generative AI, but it's the same thing. What you've got is pretty much in the real world, everybody's working with more complex work, time shortages, etc. So you're really looking for a way to get your job done. They're not acting maliciously, they're just not thinking their way through. So this is what we're dealing with. This is probably the biggest error right now rather than developing the apps. We're going to have to be real careful when we get to agentic AI with AI agents, because that's going to be these machine learning apps. And somebody is going to think their way through and just decide that he or she has a business process that they want to automate, so they'll come up with their own AI agent. But with generative AI, the real problem is what you're doing with your prompts. What are you putting into that thing? This is, even if you outlaw this in the business world with your company, you've got your own laptop sitting right beside you, just your personal computer. So this is a huge productivity increase in many respects, as long as you realize what you're doing. And you've got compliance and regulatory requirements. If you don't know what your people are doing, these things are going to be off. And you're going to be real careful that somebody doesn't enter sensitive data into a prompt. But of course, it's growing like a weed. And so I'm not at all sure that companies are designed, at the moment, their security frameworks are designed to detect. It's not so much detecting the app, it's detecting the prompts. So that's just something we got to be real careful on. Now, a good example is Cyberhaven. They're a security company, and they're really into data lineage, and they want to trace data from origin, and they want to protect it, of course, all the utilization, and where did it come from, who's altered it, who's using it, who's accessed it, et cetera, et cetera. Insider risk, that's really difficult to detect. Moving data out of your organization. Remember, we've all dumped thumb drives, so you don't do that anymore. We have it here. You can use a thumb drive at Auburn, but you have to encrypt it. So, that's fine. Risky behavior with lineage and behavioral analysis. That's just pure security stuff. Now, this is their 2024 adoption and risk report. Look at that thing. 74% of GPT non-corporate accounts, 94% of Gemini, and 96% of Bard. You all understand what a non-corporate account means? You're working off your own dime on your own computer. And we all know what the line is. If you are using a large language model to improve your work, to speed it up, could be something as simple as writing an email, writing a letter of recommendation. That's one thing. It's another thing when you start dumping in corporate spreadsheets, okay, or any sort of financial, any sort of sensitive customer data, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody understands where the line is, but when you get in a rush, this is a problem. So these are the risks. There are a lot of them. Security breaches, unauthorized access, definitely. Who are we talking about up here? They're talking about the large language model company. How long do they keep your data? You may have them on the private side. Now, the thing I'll tell you all be an interesting exercise. go out to GPT and ask it what its data retention policies are. Ask it if there's a private mode. It'll be a real interesting exercise between GPT, Anthropic, Google, and Microsoft. Okay? I wouldn't ask Meta anything. I wouldn't even raise my head up above the turf to see what's going on there. Then, of course, compliance violations. These are serious. Lawsuits, etc. Quality control, this is when you're not quite sure of your outputs because you're not real sure about your inputs. My recommendation is, if you're going to use one of these things for corporate work, is, for goodness sakes, document your prompt streams. Okay. You're just for your own peace of mind. Here's another thing. You may come across a very effective prompt stream that's not using corporate data. Well, you want to keep that anyway. Okay. Inconsistent results. This is great when you've got different departments using different machine learning solutions. If you're that siloed, well, these meetings must get to be really interesting. Intellectual property risk. Using corporate data, I think that's fine as far as data ownership goes, but you guys are well aware of the lawsuits that are going on right now between authors and the large language models. And then difficulty tracking. Your MIS group is not happy with this. I'll just tell you right now. They may be using it themselves. They're not happy with it across the corporation. Also, it'd be fascinating to see, you've got 6 or 8 people using GPT, 6 or 8 using Anthropic, Claude, and another 150 using Google Gemini for the exact same prompts. You guys ever done this? It's really cool on a split screen if you're doing something you really want to get into, and you run it on GPT, just some prompt, and then you take that output, put it over to Anthropic, hit the same prompt, and have it just working back and forth to see what one large language model says about the other one. Most authors do that. But it's different in the corporate world. These are all risks. Wasted resources, of course, duplicated efforts. This comes to your MIS group, no centralized oversight. This requires a lot of training, but it doesn't take 5 minutes to pick up a large language model. You guys know this, especially the free version. You haven't had to register. And so you've got training on prompt engineering. We used to have. We'll come back to that. Obviously, reputational damage, that goes without saying. If you're not compliant or you don't follow regulations. Documentation, that's what I'm talking about, your prompt streams. Most of you, most people forget that. I think I'd make sure I kept that. Knowledge transfer, if employees leave, that goes without saying, depending. It may be that if somebody's getting ready to go, they don't want to say anything about what they've done prompting. Technical debt, that's, boy. You can have a machine learning system that's running amok. You've got model drift going on, you've got errors increasing, you've got outliers that look like outliers but really aren't. That's technical debt. Then what are you going to get? You're going to get output you can't depend on. Ethical concerns, naturally. Audit. How would you like to be an auditing company that's your bread and butter like Deloitte, and you go into a company and you want to find out about their usage of generative AI? How much fun would that be? They give you all a lie detector test? And then, of course, if you do discover a shadow AI machine learning system, well, this gets interesting. Now you got to get in touch with your MIS group and incorporate that in your systems. Well, that's kind of interesting. Suppose it really works. MIS is going to be really delighted giving you access to corporate data on that one. Okay, I mean, the quality control is enormous. I'm trying to think of putting a generative AI prompt stream in on top of the UPS truck packing app. Okay, technical debt. All right. Here are your systems. They seem to be running really nicely on this iceberg. And down here is your technical debt, maintaining and repairing outdated technology. In other words, you haven't done this. If you do not do this and keep it up, then you're going to get technical debt. So you got outdated technology, perhaps, and or processes and or code itself. And so that's what you've got. You can handle perhaps short-term goals with a good Band-Aid or two, but you're looking down from the road for future efforts. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, okay. They've been trying to improve their software forever. We have the technology now on planes to have GPS down to way under a meter. So we have great location in 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions counting time. But the FAA is having its problems with crowded airspace. Now, I'm not talking about today because the government shut down, so we've lost a lot of air traffic control. But I'm talking about technical debt throughout the system. That's international. So we have managed to Band-Aid the FAA forever. And I just put it down there. We've been writing cases over that for 20 years, and it's still a mess. Even though the hardware and software on the planes themselves and the scheduling from the airlines has gotten much better. So here's Southwest. Now, they're classic. This happened in 2021. They had enormous technical debt because they siloed their system. They didn't pay enough attention to it. They left it here, Band-Aided it, and these are legacy systems, which means they've been in existence forever. Notice, reservations, booking, flight ops. Well, A, B, and C for what you do on an airline. What am I looking for? I want to maximize passenger miles, in other words, seat. And so they had inefficiency, they had the potential of outages. So I didn't have integration. They couldn't adapt to any new technology, and so they got hammered on performance and customer service. What happened? The whole airline melted down. I mean, just the board's going blank. It's pretty serious business, and they're still around, but it was a close call here. This is the sort of thing that you look at and you say, okay, heads are going to roll at the sea level, but this is billions of dollars to handle that technical debt. How does this work with machine learning? I would imagine that I'm not sure what Southwest was doing, but even back then they were using machine learning for reservations and bookings, probably for flight operations and optimization. And I'm not sure how that played in with everything else, but they really had a problem. If you use your company data in these large language models, and we'll come back to agents, you've got the risk, data biases, classification problems. Y'all already run that with your projects. This thing is very subtle here. Data sources with inadequate authorization policies. When you're sourcing data and you're not real sure where it comes from, then that falls right under your database administrator and her staff. And what you got to do is you got to figure out where your sources are coming from. But if you don't, you can have biases and you get all this problem. Model drift, classic. And then security debt is, I'll tell you what, have you guys read much about that? Security debt as far as using generative AI models? Neither have I. I have not seen much that's being written about the security group in your organization, cybersecurity, trying to get into what's actually being entered on generative models. I'd highly recommend you not do that unless you get your MIS group's approval. I've already run into that 4 or 5 times with outreach students who want to use data from their companies in this project here. And they asked MIS, which is exactly the right thing to do. And MIS said that would be a no. And, you know, I get it. I do. So this is, it's subtle, it's difficult, and I'll tell you now, it's driving everybody crazy. So
there's also legal implications too. Like we're switching to Amazon, and one of the things they're doing is for Teams, they're putting in an AI to like listen to your Teams and transcribe what you're saying.
Yeah.
And there's a no recording policy. Like you're not allowed to record any meetings or videos, but you're allowed to do this now apparently, and legal is kicking and screaming.
yeah, everything we talked about, compliance and regulation, regulatory issues, when you bring the lawyers in, things get very complicated very quickly. Another reason to record your prompt streams. It's a long chapter. Chapter 3, it goes before every machine learning project. It goes right along with data, trying to figure out what's going on. But this is your, once you've got all that, you've been doing your decision, you've got to find the correct business problem. And everybody goes, well, of course we do. It showed up on my desk this morning. Well, no, not exactly. You got to understand and define it. This is what you get to do. And you guys are all, you've been nailed, your MBAs. You've been nailed with SWOT analyses. We even do this in academia, if you can imagine. Customer feedback, market research, of course, with analysis. This is a fascinating look at the overall view of looking at a business problem. Okay, this is great. Let me give you the flip side here. All right, now, this is what you end up with. You don't have machine learning problems, okay? Basically, what you have are strategy problems disguised as technology problems. Keep in mind, this comes down to business professionals and business analysts. You're going to have business problems that you apply machine learning to. Now, most organizations will fail at these things. I'm not talking about generative AI now. I'm talking about conventional, okay? There's a big article that came out a couple months ago that said 95% of AI projects failed over the last year. They were all talking about generative AI, okay? So let's keep that straight. But you fail at the normal machine learning, conventional machine learning implementation, not because you chose the wrong models or the wrong algorithms or you hired the wrong tech people, but because you didn't define the business problem they were trying to solve. That's really the guts of it. If you look for something really tiny to solve, then you're probably making a mistake. Think UPS. So this is how you start. Now, the word ruthless is up there for a reason. You're going to run an audit of your core business challenges that existed long before machine learning showed up. Okay? Depends on what you do. Now, let's suppose that all of us are Auburn University vice presidents. We're going to do a ruthless audit of our core business challenges. I suppose you can imagine that would step on some toes. These challenges have been around forever, and they involve research, teaching, and service. That's what we do. And we have business processes under each one of those things. Now, when you look at these audits, what am I looking for? I'm looking for 10x improvement. Okay? I'm looking to do things a whole lot better. The UPS want to load packages. We want high graduation rates, great research, and incredible outreach. Okay? You do high to low. Your highest value problems first, then you apply machine learning as a technology solution or an accelerant. That is pretty much what companies are doing. And we tend to forget that highest value or the highest risk? Every single time. So that's what we are looking at. All right. Okay, to do that ruthless audit, if you will, and these audits are not user friendly. In other words, they go after where are we weak and how can we do it a whole lot better. 10x is great, 100x is better. And so they do root cause analysis, and this is going to be where everybody gets in a little difficulty. You do not treat the symptoms. Okay? You're going to go and you're going to have, you got these problems. Okay? You've got, these are symptoms, and you're going to so badly want to treat the symptoms. Don't do that. It'll happen every time. Now, if you're not thinking your way through it, when they say root cause, somebody walks into a doctor's office, has back pain. And this particular gentleman was in my brother's office, and he probably weighed, I don't know, extra 150 pounds. And so it just completely skewed his spinal cord, and he wanted Ken to fix him. Well, I can fuse a spinal cord. That's no problem. And that symptom, that back pain, will go from, say, a 10 to a 3. And then he will consider giving up beer. True or false? No. He will continue his own lifestyle, and he'll go back from a 3 to a 10 shortly thereafter. You cannot just look at symptoms. You'll have the symptoms in front of you. They'll show up as a forest fire on your desk, and you're going to really want to look at it. Do not do that. So what you're going to be looking at is what the root cause behind symptoms. You'll have multiple symptoms. They may not look like they're related. This is where you want to be thinking long term and not symptom by symptom. If you do this, you're going to suboptimize. And then, of course, you're going to prioritize problems naturally. Symptoms, what you can see, they're observable. You're getting increased churn, increased customer complaints, negative sentiment on social media and the marketing space. You've got subscription-based service here. The root causes, when you look at this, you have to think, okay, what's going on? Now, you guys are in a subscription-based service. I don't care if it's Verizon or Amazon or whatever, and you have these three things going on, or any two of the three. And I sit here and I go, okay, I got to find the root cause. How do I find the root cause just from those? There's a whole course taught on it in the marketing department. That would be marketing research. You ask people. Okay, you can do that automated, but you could have a lousy experience. Your website could be kludgy. You could be too expensive. You could have delays caused by the poor user experience, etc. All those are root causes as opposed to the symptoms. Now, any project that you have, you're going to follow just like you did the other information technology projects. You're going to establish your goals. Goals have to be matched up to business objectives, strategy, mission. Quantify your outcomes, define your KPIs. Now, the key performance indicators, they're not model metrics, they're business metrics. And be very careful you don't come up with a vanity metric. It may look, it's a KPI now, I'm on the business side. It may look like it's meaningful, but doesn't provide useful insights. So this is the type of thing that you want to avoid. And you're always going to consider both business and technological goals for the project naturally. Which comes first? Business does. Okay, consider a vanity metric like number of Instagram followers. Okay. Looking at this, you you got 1 million followers, and you say that's a vanity metric because it's not engaging, doesn't measure their engagement. What's the measure of their engagement? What do you want your followers to do? You're running the website.
Like the posts. Share the posts.
Well, you could share the posts, you could buy stuff, you could do click-through, you could have, this comes into a lot of, for example, if I've got a lot of, would I rather have someone who comes on my website 10 or 15 times or 10 or 15 unique users, unique visitors? I look for unique visitors, okay? Do I care much about stickiness? Well, it'd be nice to have eyeballs for a length of time, but that means somebody could go out to dinner and come back and not turn the computer off, and it looks like they've been living on your site. All right, so you've got to work the way. You're not making a clear connection to revenue, and you're looking for quantity over quality. Now, if you're a Kardashian, where are you? Well, there's 6 of them, and they have 1 billion followers. Okay, so they really have number of followers. That means they are de facto influencers, which means what for their ad rates? Their ad rates are very expensive if you want to advertise on a Kardashian site. Okay, and their click-through is outstanding. They are very, very successful. So is Taylor Swift. They're running gigantic businesses. Do you not think they examine this? So they're looking for the engagement rate, which is great, conversion rate here. Are you buying stuff? And over time. Okay? Now, once you get through that very first, I found a project, somebody's got to establish the metrics for it. It's like we were talking about with the UPS case. They had a hell of a time establishing metrics. And remember I said they finally got around to the number of trucks coming back with empty, on time and empty. Okay, now that's rare, but you know they counted up the number of packages that came back at the end of the day type thing. So then you're going to, how does that translate into finance? What kind of money you're making? Realistic timelines. Now, this is a problem for machine learning. We have an unfortunate situation out there where C-level people want almost instantaneous ROI. That's not going to work with machine learning. You're going to have to use it over time. Why? Because you have to keep training it. Okay, the training never stops. So running ROI and really, look, we're 90-day thinkers. Okay, that's the way we are in the States. And ROI after 90 days is problematic. So you got to think your way through that. By the way, you'll have business professionals here that are writing the checks. They're looking for 90-day ROI. Back them up. Non-financial benefits. Everybody loves improved decision making. Nobody knows what it means. Okay. Enhanced customer experience. That's great. We all know what that means. It'd be great to have employee satisfaction. You got to be careful increasing productivity. This may mean doing more with less. Somebody's been, there's 10 people in your group, 2 people have been let go. The other 8 of you, they don't hire anybody else to replace those folks. Who gets to do it? You do. Competitive advantage in the marketplace. Now, once you've got that, and you've considered this, the most important part right here are the metrics, but notice methods for measuring and reporting success. At some point, you're going to have to figure out how to translate these metrics into how you measure and report. Now, reporting is pretty easy on a dashboard. That's fairly straightforward. Measuring is another thing entirely. Then you've got stakeholders, and you guys, you're in a business school, you understand there are a lot of stakeholders. Let's use something really simple, like Brian Kelly at LSU. How many stakeholders and where were they meeting on Brian on Sunday, yesterday? Y'all know? They were meeting in the governor's mansion in Louisiana. You can't make this stuff up. Now that's interesting because I don't think they have a president at LSU right now. I think they're recruiting one. So the governor took over Brian Kelly's termination. So when I'm talking about stakeholders, guys, I mean all over the map. you had the donors, you had the other coaches, you had ex-players, you had the, this, that, and the other. So understand what you're running into here. You've got business partners, you've got customers, big customers, you've got all sorts of people in your organization, and you're going to have to, some of their requirements conflict, as it were. So functional requirements, statements of capabilities, the system must perform. Non-functional, how well it does. Okay, then you get conflicts in communication. This is a bear. Some stakeholders are very influential. For example, your CEO answers to their boards, and trying to get everybody on the same page sometimes can get really tricky, but you have to do both of these requirements. Okay, these are functional requirements. Notice that. Specific statements of capabilities. Okay, I'm trying to go in there with authentication. We all do this. You're going to have to pull in data from all these different places. That's fine. On a recommendation system, you do what we're all familiar with, and you're going to come up with a dashboard. That's pretty straightforward with what we do functionally. In non-functional, you get to deal with all this stuff. Now, the question comes up here, where do you as business professionals fit into functional requirements and non-functional? Probably you're in here with the analysts. And here you get to talk to the tech professionals. This is kind of interesting. Y'all know the gold standard for performance. If you put 2 seconds up there, you're going to get irritated users. Usually it's sub-second. And Amazon brought that to you. That's pretty slack right here. Scalability, that's good. Especially if you're dealing cloud computing, because you just spin up more servers. The availability is 3 nines. Probably, I would expect they'd at least go 4 nines here. This is probably what most of the companies just had with Amazon Web Services when it went down. So that's not so good. Then you're going to have your encryption stuff. And of course, I really like the easy to navigate. Intuitive. That's really important. We've had that around forever. Get to user intuitive where it's difficult to make a mistake. Not only easy to navigate, but difficult for users to make a mistake. This kind of comes down to like military jargon. If you can develop a weapon system that it's almost impossible for an infantryman to break, you've really done something. The same thing with users. There's always going to be users like me that screw it up. Okay, my generation. That I will tell you right now, this is tech professional stuff that is very difficult. Okay, now you get to do the constraints. Back to you guys. By all means, let's assess the budget. You think you've been in meetings before? Try a budget meeting. Realistic timelines, internal resources. Naturally, you're going to do all this stuff, except people forget that you got to figure out how to do this as you go through. In the meantime, while you're in these meetings, you got to do your other job. Technological constraints, naturally, regulations and compliance, bring the legal people in, and ethical considerations and constraints. That goes without saying, but everybody forgets. Constraints are difficult. That goes with your SWOT analysis too. Now, here's what you got. If you have a problem and you think I'm going to put a machine learning solution on it, this is what you can look for as a good indication. Large amounts of available data. Large language models have all forgotten the word available. They have vacuumed up the internet, regardless of copyright. You can't do that in your organization. Okay. That's really tricky in healthcare. It's really tricky in customer-facing applications. It may be available. It's not good if you don't de-identify it. Now, if you need to come up with patterns that are difficult, or relationships difficult for humans to figure out, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about so many features and such huge data sets that you cannot intuit it as a human. Fraud detection, credit card transactions, we've been over those. Repetitive tasks, consistent decision making. Okay. I detect fraud. What do I do with it? Cancel that transaction, report that to you. That's a repetitive task. It needs to be done in real time. Okay? If you have an unusual situation, edge cases, now you get to put in the escalation mechanism. How soon do you send it to a human and how often? And this gets to be, these are incredibly valuable in training, edge cases. Think autonomous vehicles. We absolutely feast on edge cases. A tree branch blocks a stop sign and the autonomous car rolls right through it. Okay, that's happened. The ethics edge cases. Okay, you're stopped behind a school bus and you're not quite sure whether to go ahead or not, depending when the bus puts its, how close are you when it puts its sign out. A ball rolls out in front of you, a kid tracks after it. You kill yourself or take out the kid. Those are ethics edge cases. And then you've got, this is an extremely difficult one when you've got human expertise is limited. If it's limited, that means it's expensive. Why? This is labeling. Okay, if you have a scenario, it's a great for machine learning solution as long as you can get at this expertise. Predictive maintenance is fine in manufacturing. Labeling all your data to make sure it's correct. That's classic, particularly in medicine. So that's well and good. Now, are you ready? This comes back to you guys. So you're going to evaluate the data. That'll help you. You'll be working with the tech people. Infrastructure and capabilities. How much compute, what we call compute, do you have access to? Your tech folks will talk about that. How much do you need? You'll have to tell them. And again, you can scale pretty easily today. You cannot get data availability always. And then you've got, what do you have going? This is where companies are in the crosshairs right now. What skills do you have in your organization? How bad is their knowledge gap? So right here, you can draw a big red circle around that and put reskilling. This is what everybody's screaming about right now. And they're doing it. And then organizational barriers. Okay. Covert resistance and overt resistance. Now you got a couple choices. You could be like the CEO of Accenture. If you don't ramp up, you're gone. She's getting ready to spend $900 million upgrading Accenture to an AI company. And one of her barriers is your willingness to upscale, to reskill. Okay, now, once you get through with all that, you've gone through chapter 3 with all that strategy discussion. You've gone through the first 3 sections of 4, and you've gotten to this point where you say, okay, we can train up folks. If you have to, you can go hire them. If you have a knowledge of the company already, it's better to reskill. And so you talked about the barriers, you address those. Remember at UPS, remember they had the carrot and the stick? Who gets to decide the carrot and the stick? You guys do. Remember, the hammer is you're gone. That's the stick. The carrot is kudos. You get to keep your job, get to be more efficient. We've reskilled you, we've upskilled you. Things are looking good. What's the benefit right now to having a course like this one when you're hired? It's 28% on average increase in your starting salary. That's marketplace numbers, that's not Rayner numbers. Unless you come to work at higher education, in which you come in with everybody else. This is not a case where I call Linda up, I say, order the blue Mercedes, okay? All right. So here's a coffee shop chain. This is a true story that we have removed the name of the company. Had a decline in customer visits and revenue over the past year. All right. Symptoms or root cause?
Symptoms.
Symptoms. All right. So they had these data. So I'm looking at sales data. By the way, what's on every sale? If you have your credit card number, you know, if you have a loyalty card, they can identify you personally, but it has a timestamp. Okay. Customer feedback, naturally. Operational reports, that's standard, by the way. You've already got those. You're going to, if you have this, you're going to start paying particularly attention to that. And of course, you've got sales data coming in on your point of sale terminal. Okay. Or your clickstream data. All right. So here's what happened. They weren't attracting new customers, especially young ones. Well, how in the hell? If you've got this, how did you get their age? You're the CEO of this coffee shop chain. How in the world do I know that I'm not attracting young new customers?
Is it like you said, where older people like simpler coffee orders? Was that what it was, or?
That's one way to get at it. You know, somebody in my generation, if they go in and say, grande latte hot, that's about the extent of our knowledge, okay? And the rest of you guys are doing 39 other things with pumps and this and BGG. That's one way. Ask your staff. Do market research. Okay? Now, I don't know what in the world here. Longer wait times during peak hours, increased negative reviews, you know, about their mobile app. So their longer wait times, their mobile app gave them problems. And so these are symptoms here. So they did have brand recognition, good quality coffee. That's great. Their digital presence and menu innovation. By the way, I was just in Starbucks a few minutes ago. They've added protein to the drinks. Put them on top of the drink or something like that. Alter the taste. Trying to make you healthy. Okay. That's just, all right, so there it is. So here you go. Do customer surveys, secret shoppers. You never know if you're a barista who could be coming through there. All right, they look for healthier drink options, increased demand for mobile ordering capabilities. By the way, if you want to make somebody who walks into a store absolutely insane, watch what happens with mobile ordering. Walk into Starbucks, there's 4 people in line, and what do I hear? Beep, 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 beep. Every mobile order comes in there, and you're standing there. And next thing you get up there, there's 3 of you in line now, and there's 27 cups there. And you're the 28th person. All right. First, they thought it was pricing. Okay. They looked for the guts of it, the root cause, perceived value. Well, that comes from secret shoppers and customer surveys. All right. That's expensive, but it's market research. Prices weren't too high, but they had a limited menu. I didn't understand where they got the outdated store designs. This case didn't go into that, but I thought that's kind of interesting. So they increased functionality mobile app, reduced the wait times, improved customer experience naturally. Renovated stores, maybe that was for the young folks. They did expand the menu, and they did their marketing campaign targeting younger customers. So that's a pretty standard way you look at one of these problems or opportunities. Well, here's Coca-Cola. They have one of the great global distribution networks of any company in the world, no question about it. And so they're having problems globally. That'd be an interesting problem to have. So they looked at sales data, inventory levels, production schedules naturally, and distribution metrics. Here's the thing, across regions. Who determines what's a region? In general, North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, Asia, EMEA. You get to decide what that is. Here's the problem. What's your danger here? You can go in two directions, both of which will give you problems. If I go too granular, then I'm going to have to get very ticky with the distribution network. In other words, if I get down sub-country into regions of a country, if I go too writ large, then I'm going to miss some detail. This is a bear of a problem. Okay? One of my former students is from Kimberly Clark. She owns the process quote to cash, okay, for Kimberly Clark, which means she's at least a director level now. But I was talking to her the other day, and of all things, she was down here for a football game. And I said, so how's that going? You know, with the problems in China. And she's been to China 3 or 4 times this summer. And she said, oh, they love our products. We don't have any problem on that right now. Tariffs are kind of interesting, but she said this gets to be, you have to be very careful region by region here. And she said not too much granularity, not too little, but that's her, in that particular business process, this is her biggest problem globally. So they've got inconsistent inventory levels with Coke here, overstocked and stock out. You guys understand you don't want any overstocking if you can avoid it, because I don't want to carry inventory, and I sure don't want stock outs. Here's the thing, which is worse? Well, it depends on how much overstocking there is. And then, of course, I get increased warehousing and stuff. Now, I didn't realize Coke ever expired. I was going to ask you guys. I'm not a big Coke person, but how long is it before Coke gets flat? If it's just being stored gently. I don't know. But anyway, when I looked at this, I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I figured about 2,000 years.
That's the old, like, 70s
I
Coca-Cola.
was like, what did they say about those little Debbie's cakes? The anthropologists in 2,000 or 3,000 years, the only thing they'll see from our generation are toilet seats and little Debbie cakes. I thought that must be like Coca-Cola. But imagine, though, if you do have expiration dates, okay? All right. So here's their strengths. They did the usual SWOT. They absolutely have a great distribution network, historical sales data you can imagine. I just didn't get this. Manual demand forecasting made no sense to me. Now, regional planning being siloed, I can understand that. This, if you really want to know low-hanging fruit, that's it right there to go with some machine learning-driven demand forecasting. Okay, so they're going to use analytics, machine learning-driven analytics to improve their forecasting. Strike it here. What's interesting is you're going to get to talk to whoever's running these regions, and they're all going to get on the same page. Okay, so I'm got a little problem here with extra money on the logistics, and I'm not sure. They were talking about competitors with more efficient supply chains. I think they're more worried about competitors are rising with more efficient supply chains. So their stakeholder, they had bottlers, distributors, and retailers that were very concerned with the supply chain. Coca-Cola bottlers make a bunch of money. And they're very powerful, and so they pay a lot of attention to them. Okay, so he thought it was logistics. However, they were looking at all the symptoms, and this is what their root cause looked at. Demand forecasting was based on historical averages, but they missed out on seasonal factors. Now, what does that mean for your models? If you looked at a model here, you've lost these features. Okay, for some reason, they weren't factoring in seasons. We sell a lot more Cokes here during the fall than we do any other time of the year in town. And local events and weather patterns. You've got to factor in the weather, so we needed more features. Their decisions were made regionally and they did not optimize. So what they do, they sub-optimize naturally. Now, what I was fascinated with is their planning cycles. You plan way in advance, as you all know, but they weren't flexible enough to adopt to when these factors up here change the market. If you're looking at a prime machine learning opportunity, you're looking at it. Okay, so they want to reduce inventory naturally in stockouts. All right. Now, what they had to do, they had to figure out to get away from a manual demand forecasting. Just don't do that. So they're going for data-driven supply chain, machine learning, and they're going to use it as a competitive advantage. There's your financial impact, straightforward, inventory costs, waste, lost sales. All right. Responsive to market conditions and customer satisfaction. Okay, what does that lead to? Higher utilization, greater profits, logistics costs, a competitive market, resource requirements. Notice what they needed. They needed machine learning people, and they need to put in some technology infrastructure. My guess is at their level, they need to get off in the cloud somewhere. They have their own cloud, I'm not sure, and raise their compute. That's what they put in. Machine learning demand forecasting, inventory optimization. Notice, multiple features. All the stuff we talked about that they had not considered, weather and so forth, they added in as features. And what I liked was economic indicators because you can do those on country level. And you can roll them up to regions. Well, notice what they ended up with. They dropped their forecast error, which is great, decreased the cost of inventory, improved product availability, which meant fewer stockouts. Life is good. So what they did, they saw it, they saw the symptoms, came up with the cause, and put machine learning in there on top of a business problem. Okay. We'll continue this on Wednesday.